Welcome everybody to the second of two community meetings, virtual meetings on Zoom that I'm hosting for the benefit of my constituents. I am an advisory neighborhood commissioner in the Chevy Chase area of Washington, as many of you already know, but there are some people new to this conversation tonight, so I want to make sure that everyone understands the context that we're operating in. As an advisory neighborhood commissioner, I represent about 2,000 people within a commission area that has 15,000 people. And in our commission area, there are two planned installations of artificial turf. One that is proposed by the city, District of Columbia government, at our local elementary school, Lafayette Elementary, and another that is planned by Maret School, whose head of school, Dennis Biscard, is with us tonight, that is located on the grounds of the Episcopal Center for Children in the district that I represent, and about 2 blocks away from Lafayette Elementary School. The reason that we're gathered tonight and that we've been doing these community meetings is that there is great interest in the community regarding artificial turf. I received numerous calls and letters from constituents, as does our advisory neighborhood commission. And the way that I've been thinking about the issues and framing them for my community is as follows. We here, like so many communities around the country, all want access to reliably playable athletic fields. And at the same time, we want those fields to be safe. The safety issues came up prominently in our prior meeting, focused on safety. Safety related to injury, safety related to heat effects, safety related to environmental concerns around the disposal of artificial turf once it's reached its end of its life cycle. And then more recently, concerns that have had to do with chemicals in turf, particularly PFAS, as well as microplastics. So, a very rich conversation around those topics for nearly 2 hours on March 26th. Tonight, we're going to focus on the other side of the tension, if you will, or the issue that I just laid out, and that is the playability of athletic fields, comparing and contrasting artificial turf and natural grass playing fields on a series of factors related to design, construction, maintenance, actual playability, and cost. And so we're here tonight to take a look at those issues in depth and detail. We have a great lineup of panelists whom I'll introduce here in just a moment. Again, the audience here is diverse. There are many people on the call who are not in my single member district or in the ANC that our commission represents, the area that our commission represents, but there are many people on the call who are my constituents, and I welcome all of them. Again, this is primarily for their benefit, but I welcome everyone on the call so that they can come away better informed and better able to make their own judgments about the relative merits of artificial turf and natural grass playing fields. We're hoping throughout the course of the conversation to have a rich discussion, a rich dialogue. We want to illuminate the issues. I'm hoping for much more light than heat. This is not a debate, it's a discussion. We are aiming to have a very good, rich exchange. The chat will be open, but a few things that I think will be helpful for us to keep in mind as we go through the evening. In the chat, it'll be helpful to share information, share links to websites that you think would be helpful for people to consult. Ask in the chat and put forward during the Q&A clarifying questions. If something you didn't understand, you want more information on. And at the same time, this is a democratic forum, and I believe in democracy, and I believe in free speech, and I believe in people having their say. So feel free to challenge a presenter, but always respectfully, and in the interest of trying, as I say, to accomplish what we hope to do here, which is to improve everyone's understanding so that all of the folks on the call, particularly my constituents, can form their own judgments. So with that said, let's get started. The run of show is going to be as follows. We're going to have a series of presentations, about 8 or so presentations. That'll probably take us 60 minutes to get through. And then we will open it up for Q&A and discussion with the community. I'm going to introduce our panelists in the order in which I'm going to ask them to speak. So let me get started with that. Dr. Trey Brindle. Trey, if you can identify yourself and come up on the screen. I know you're on the call. It's very good to see you. Trey is Director of Research and Innovation at FieldTurf. He is a human movement scientist who specializes in sports biomechanics. He's going to be presenting tonight along with Dennis Biscard, whom I mentioned earlier is the head of school at Maret. Maret is a private K-12 college preparatory day school in Washington, D.C., with an enrollment of about 650 students. Maret has selected Shaw Sports Turf as the product that it intends to use and install at the Episcopal Center for Children property that I mentioned a moment ago for a sports set of two different athletic fields, baseball and then a multi-purpose sports field, soccer, lacrosse, football, that they are about to break ground on. So they're going to present first together. And then Darren Gill, who is the Executive Vice President of Tarkett Sports, which owns FieldTurf, will follow. Darren was on our call on March 26th. FieldTurf is the product that the District of Columbia has selected for use at the Lafayette Elementary School. Following them will be Son Roesslein. Son is the sports stadium manager for the North Area Athletic Complex, which encompasses football and soccer in Golden, Colorado. She's coming to us from Colorado. That complex is the home field for 6 high schools in the Jefferson County School District there in Colorado. Son is also president of the board of directors of the Sports Field Management Association. Tonight, however, she's going to be speaking in her capacity as an actual practitioner, a manager of athletic fields. Joining also
I don't have sound.
Will be, if you can mute if you're coming on the call, that would be great. Otherwise, I'll find you and I'll mute. I'm just going to do a little bit of maintenance here, guys. Hang on one second. There we go. Following Son will be Arno Harmsen and Aaron Golembievsky. Those two gentlemen are CEO and head of business development respectively for DrainTalent, which is a private company that is involved in growing and nurturing natural grass fields using a very innovative new technology that they will be happy to explain to us. Following Arno and Aaron, Melanie Taylor from the Synthetic Turf Council. Melanie is the CEO there, and John Amato, who is a civil engineer, president of a company called JJA Sports, which does planning and design for schools and community-based programs for both synthetic and natural turf fields. Kristen Mello, who is a councilor at large on the city council in Westfield, Massachusetts, and an analytical chemist. And Diana Conway, president of Safe Healthy Playing Fields, will follow and round out our panel. So we have quite a lineup, and I'm looking forward to hearing from everyone. And we're going to go in that particular order. So what I'm going to ask the participants to do, again, is just to listen attentively. Think about the questions you'd like to pose, but do me one big favor. While the presenters are presenting, let's refrain from challenging what they're saying in real time. Let's let them present as if we were together in person and we were listening to a presenter live. We wouldn't be talking while the presenter was presenting. So let's respect that and get started. And Trey Brindle, I want to go to you, and Dennis Biscard of Maret, please take it away. And I will allow you to share your screen, Trey.
Okay, great. Thank you, Commissioner Sherman, for inviting us all here.
Dr. This is Trey Holloway, the other Trey from Maret. Can I just get us started real quick before you jump in?
For sure, okay. Trey.
So Trey, if you would just quickly introduce yourself for the group. Yeah.
Yeah, sure thing. I'm gonna share my screen and then I will do that. So thank you, Bruce, for this opportunity to be here tonight. I'm Trey Holloway. I'm the assistant head of school at Maret School. So I'm in charge of finance and operations in our facilities, which includes this field. So I've put up here on my screen a rendering of the field that we're bringing online here. As Maret, we have a lot of our current families that live in this ANC. A lot of our kids come from Lafayette Elementary School to Maret. I have a lot of alumni that live in the area, also specifically in Bruce's single member district. So it's an area that we're familiar with, and we're really proud to be bringing this facility online here, not just for Maret kids, but also for the kids at the district at large, and also for the community. As a school, we currently have 2 artificial turf fields that we manage. This would be the third. The 2 that we currently manage have both been replaced in the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years, and it's the second iteration of both of those fields being artificial turf. So as a school, we've made a practice of really staying abreast of the latest technology in turf fields, doing our research about products that are out there and available, not just artificial turf, but also grass, and looking at the viability of those products. And the thing that I want to do before Dr. Brindle starts is just talk really quickly about the our plan for the site and our use, which is why we think that Shaw, first, that artificial turf was the best choice for us, and then no shade to Taryn Gill, but why we chose Shaw as the product for us this time around. So Maret has a wide variety of sports teams. At this field, we're going to be able to play football, lacrosse, soccer, baseball, softball, lots of different things. We'll be able to have multiple teams practicing here at once. We plan for this field to be used by our sports teams 5, if not 6 days a week for multiple hours a day. We also plan to make it available on weekends when we're not using it for youth sports organizations, as well as for the community to use. So we expect that this field is going to get somewhere in the neighborhood of, 25 to 35 hours of play per week. So it'll be a pretty heavily used field for us. That's notwithstanding any use that may happen during school days, either by the Episcopal Center or other schools in the area. So that's why we thought artificial turf was the right choice for us in this. Dr. Brindle is here. He's going to talk about Shaw and why they make what they know about turf, and some of the information that we were able to ascertain as we were making our decision. So I just wanted to set that up for you, Trey, and I will let you go.
Very good, Trey Holloway. Thank you. Trey Brindle, before you get started, just let me note for the panelists, as I'd noted in my correspondence with you in the run-up to the event tonight, we're aiming for about 7-8 minutes or so per presentation. So be mindful of that, and I'll kind of call you on the time when we near that. So go ahead, Trey Brindle. Thank you.
Great, and thanks, Trey Holloway. That was a great setup. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So a little bit about me. I'm the science guy in the company. So I'm definitely not the business or marketing. So we're just going to talk a little bit about turf science today. My task at Shaw Sports Turf is to develop new products and measures to reduce the impact of turf as a risk factor for athletic injury in field sports. Reducing injury rates has implications for both helping individuals and teams reach their full potential. In a recent NFL webinar led by Dr. Alan Sills, the NFL's chief medical officer, a team of experts who are closely monitoring injury in the NFL presented their findings. They reported that all of the last 5 Super Bowl winning teams were in the bottom half of overall NFL team injury rates. 4 of the last 5 Super Bowl winners were in the bottom quarter of those injury rates. So how can we reduce team injury rates in field sports? First, we need to understand how injuries develop. When players get injured, this is what we all see. Have you ever watched a player go down during a game with a perplexing injury, maybe one where no contact with another player was made, and perhaps when they were performing a routine play? It leaves you scratching your head. It's confusing because there's more to an injury event than meets the eye. Injury occurs when forces applied to the body exceeds a threshold for tissue damage. In contact injuries, those forces are easy to see, because they are external to the body, for example, a tackle. In non-contact injuries, those forces are hard to see because they are internal to the body. Because of this, the development of non-contact injuries is thought to be more complex. Newton's third law, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, applies here. When a player lands from a jump, the force they are exerting on the ground is also being exerted on them, and can in most cases be 5 times the player's weight. So when everyone watches a player like Michael Gallup here tear his ACL on the field, this is what they see. But from a biomechanical perspective, I want to share with you that this is what a biomechanist sees. This is from 30 years of athletic injury development research. This is the pathway to a non-contact injury. The pathway starts well before the play, and in most cases before the game. It starts with a predisposed athlete, an athlete with intrinsic risk factors. The most well-known risk factor is previous injury. Other factors include age, flexibility, and all of these are intrinsic to risk factors. That means that they're internal to the person. When a predisposed athlete is exposed to an extrinsic risk factor, something external to the person, such as the playing surface, weather, or inappropriate training volumes, then that athlete becomes susceptible to injury. And then all that's left is an inciting event when the force exceeds the threshold for a tissue's yield point and injury results. My first point in the short presentation is that injuries are complex. It's important to understand that there's more than what meets the eye. Going back to that NFL webinar, Dr. Melanie Herzog from IQVIA presented the top 12 time loss injuries in the NFL. And right in the middle are intrinsic and extrinsic risk factors that experts identified as being important to football players. They should look familiar because we just talked about them. Things like prior injury, training conditioning, and at the bottom you have cleat surface interaction. Cleat surface interaction is significant because notice that these experts, they don't say surface and they don't say artificial turf. Rather, it's a combination of the cleat and the cleat surface. This brings me to my second point. There are many risk factors to injury. The one risk factor that relates to the surface is cleat surface interaction. We're going to spend a few more minutes on this point so I can share with you research from the NFL in a top-tier research university that cleat surface interaction is the risk factor. First, from the NFL. This graph contains the statistics from the NFL that's at the epicenter of the artificial turf injury debate. Lower extremity non-direct contact injuries that result in missed time during the NFL regular season are divided into 2 groups here, turf and grass. The variable plotted is the injury incidence rate per 100 player plays. I've seen many interpretations of this graph on social media, and none of them are correct. Usually the post goes something like this. The number for turf is higher than the number for grass, so turf must be more dangerous, which is completely the wrong way to look at this. Just because numbers are different does not mean that they are meaningful. So let's convert these numbers from 100 player plays to something meaningful. Let's convert them to the number of injuries per team per game on each type of field across all these seasons. First, we divide the number by 100, and then we multiply the number by the number of players on the field for one team during each play and the number of total plays during a game. And what you find when you do this is that for every single season on a representative turf or grass field, there is only 1 injury per team per game. So now you can assign meaningfulness to these data, and there is no meaningfulness to separating out injury incidence rates by natural and turf fields. Moving away from the NFL, in 2013 at a top-tier research institution, they were asking the same question. Is there a higher risk factor for injury on artificial turf versus natural grass fields? They tracked injury incidents of 555 high school football players over 3 years. They measured their exposure to turf and grass, and they measured their cleat-to-surface interaction on every surface they played on. And when I say cleat-to-surface interaction, what do I mean? I mean the resistance to movement of the cleat on the surface. In this study, they used a lightweight footwear tester to measure the translational traction, the gliding, and the rotational traction. And what they found was that there were no differences in injury rates between turf and grass. However, they did find that there were specific ranges of cleat surface interaction that increased injury in those high school football players on both grass and turf fields. Which leads me to my third point. Not all artificial turf fields are created equal. If I did an adequate job reporting the literature, you should now understand that the risk factor for non-contact injury is cleat surface interaction. And it's meaningless to separate fields by categories such as artificial turf, monofilm, and slit film. These categories of field type are meaningless to injury because they don't address the real issue. The real issue is the cleat surface interaction. A great quote that I want to leave you with is from Dr. Calvin Huang from Stanford University. He's the football team's physician. He said, there's always evolving technology, both with grass, but especially with artificial turf. End quote. Artificial turf is an engineered product, and we can engineer it to meet a wide range of performance specifications. But what's important to the player are those extrinsic risk factors. And so, seeing my time is up, I'm going to stop it there and hand it over.
Great, Trey. Thank you. Thank you very much. I know that Dennis Biscard is also part of this presentation. So Dennis, please join us and speak to the group.
Well, thank you, Bruce. You know, because we wanted to make sure that we only use our allotted time, this is how we decided to actually approach it. But, you know, we certainly appreciate you have this forum. You know, we are eager to be good neighbors, and you know, we think that we have a wonderful you know, product, and I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate, you know, Trey you know, interacting, you know, with neighbors, and we are glad to be here, but again, do not want to take up more time than we allotted.
Well, thank you for that. I know that we'll have questions and conversation in the discussion period, so we'll come back, no doubt, to some of these issues.
Thank
and Trey Brindle, we might, and Trey Holloway might want to come back to some of the issues around playability and the construction and maintenance that we're focused on tonight. So we'll park those for now and come back. Let's go then to Darren Gill, who again is Executive Vice President of Tarkett Sports, which owns FieldTurf. Darren, please.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I will also share my screen. Someone can let me know when they see it.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you. So welcome back. I was pleasure to speak to you again. I spoke the first time, and I think it was a great discussion. I really enjoy hearing the various discussion points. I think this is how our industry gets better. Our company is one of the largest turf companies in the world. We specialize in artificial turf, but we also have a hybrid natural grass called Grassmaster. I understand there'll be a talk a little bit later about hybrid turf. I'm excited about that discussion as well. So our belief as a company is that we want to be the choice underfoot of athletes, whether it be natural grass or artificial turf. We also build running tracks and basketball, gymnasiums. So, you know, we cater to athletes. Safety is paramount to what we do. And to me, one of the starting points specific to the artificial turf discussion was, why are there so many artificial turf sports fields installed? I think we've kind of surfaced around the topic of why some believe that it's not good, but clearly, given the fact that turf has been around now since really our company, since the late 80s into the mid 90s, was really kind of the starting point, the tipping point being in 1999 when Nebraska installed FieldTurf Memorial Stadium. But now we have about 20,000 artificial sports fields installed in the US alone. So there has to be a reason why. So I think it's helpful to have a bit of a baseline for why clients are going in this direction. And this is not a specific comment about alternatives. I believe that there are places for all of these sports fields, for natural grass, for artificial turf. I believe that they can work in harmony. I'm hoping the SFMA agrees that just the same, that artificial turf can be used as a great tool for sports field managers in helping reduce playable time on natural grass fields. So there's a few issues. There's the playability and durability, there's water savings, there's player safety, and then there's a return on investment. I'm going to go over some of these issues a little bit quickly just because we do have limited time and I want to make sure that we have time for all the speakers. But I just wanted to dive into some of the reasons why artificial turf is indeed being used by so many institutions and parks and recreation facilities across America. So with respect to playability and durability, I'm going to try and play this video and hopefully you guys can hear it.
Can't hear the sound, unfortunately, Darren.
Unfortunately, okay. I don't know how to change that. So I'll narrate over this. I did share it, Bruce, and you shared it with the group, so it is available for people to watch. But here's a coach in California. He's very mad at the CIF, which is the institution that manages athletics in California at the high school level. And he's saying, shame on you. They have to play on a natural grass field that was barely playable. And what he indicated is that other teams get to play on turf, and why don't they? So, here is a client of ours, or a potential client of ours, who's a football coach, who's saying, we want an artificial turf surface. So although, we'll have other discussions this evening about suitable alternatives, what's clear is that Coach Perucci's field that he played on in the state championship game was not one that he believed his athletes should be on. More particularly, other fields in state that are turf were being used for other games. So this is just an example of the other opinion, right? So there's the opinion that turf isn't ideal, that turf shouldn't be used, but there's a lot of people who believe that it is. Again, I'm not having the safety discussion. We had that on the last call. I'm trying to, shed some light on why artificial turf is being used by so many people in so many areas. And again, I'm not going to read through these. I will provide this. So part of my reasoning for building this slide deck tonight was really just to also as a leave behind that I know Bruce will share with the constituents after the meeting. It just gives you a sense from athletic directors and coaches why artificial turf has been great for them, why their grass fields were in disrepair, why fields that had turf were playable and those that didn't had to reschedule games. There is benefit to this 24/7, 365 type surface that can be used. I'm up in Montreal, Canada, where, right now all the turf fields near me are open and all of the grass fields in our community are closed. So if my son wants to play outdoors and train outdoors, which he does on a FieldTurf field and a Shaw field, he trains on artificial turf. The grass fields in Montreal will not open up until early June. So there is a compelling reason for artificial turf and what it brings with respect to its all-weather capabilities. So I think, we heard this obviously from Maret School just around the available hours. So hours that are available on artificial turf versus natural grass are substantially different. Natural grass requires more downtime. This means there's opportunities for rental to local organizations. It means that the community can use surfaces that otherwise they might not be able to. So it's giving people access to playable surfaces that might not have been there, that might be reserved for elite groups or a select group. Obviously, we talked about weather. These fields are obviously, can be used for secondary sports, can be used for band, whereas in many cases, those types of sports or band specifically is in parking lots and not on fields. In terms of water savings, again, this is something that I think is not lost on the industry. Yes, I fully acknowledge that there's a small subset of artificial turf products that do require irrigation. Some of the organic-based products do. Specifically the geo-based products that are more husk related, they need the moisture to maintain their playing characteristics. This is a small number of synthetic turf fields that are being offered in the marketplace. The vast majority of them do not require any sort of irrigation. Sports Turf Managers Association, before it became SFMA, said that a natural grass field so a turf field would save 1.5 million gallons of water per year. The Salt Lake City Council in Murray, Utah, estimated that by converting to synthetic turf, they'd be saving 2 million gallons of water per year. So over the field's lifespan, that's 16 million gallons of water. Again, this is something that is a scarce resource. It's something that we are trying to save. It is something that we believe should be saved, and synthetic turf goes a long way in doing that.
Here's my yellow baby sweatshirt.
With respect to player safety, I think Dr. Brindle did an excellent job in highlighting some of the facts. Again, I shared a lot of these studies, so they're available, and I know Bruce will reshare the file to the group if they were not on the first call. But not only, is there some empirical data that stands behind it, a lot of our clients believe the same thing. What we like to say as a company is that our proof is in the ground, and I don't believe for a second that there would be 20,000 artificial turf fields in America if artificial turf was unsafe. If artificial turf wasn't safe, NFL teams would not continue to invest in artificial turf for their fields. The Cincinnati Bengals that are redoing their field right now that have a prize quarterback in Joe Burrow, there's an outdoor stadium. If they believe that natural grass was the best thing for their stadium, I believe they would be installing it. We could talk about player preference amongst elite soccer players. I understand that. That's a player preference issue. That's not a player injury issue. There are plenty of athletes that actually enjoy playing on artificial turf. Regrettably, those voices get drowned out because they're not talking when they're happy. You're hearing those who might be a little bit less happy. There are a lot of studies. Some obviously look at field turf versus other synthetic turf fields like this one. Many look at field turf versus natural grass. It just so happens that obviously field turf is one of the more prevalent artificial turf systems installed in the US. Those will say that field turf funds these studies. While we funded Dr. Myers' research, we do not touch the data. This is a double-blind study. All of the clients that participate in this study are actually tracking player injuries. This data is not being taken or misconstrued, and the data that's being tracked is on artificial turf and on natural grass. But it's clear in many serious injury categories that artificial turf is indeed safer than natural grass. The same goes for soccer, where studies echo the same. On the last call, Melanie Taylor did a good job by pointing this group to some of those soccer studies that were done by others. This is not the only subset of studies that back up the safety of artificial turf. Again, there's more. And I fully believe that, again, the clients who have installed 1, 2, and 3 surfaces, we have many clients who are on their 3rd synthetic turf surface. They would not be doing this if they felt like the injury rates on their fields were substantially higher than they could be on alternative surfaces like natural grass. And again, this is women's soccer as well. And certainly when it comes to return on investment, there's a lot of independent research that's been published on this. This is from the Montgomery County Work Group with respect to their 20-year cost summary as they looked at the fields installed in their communities. A lot of it was driven, obviously, specific to the annual hours of use that are possible on these surfaces based on what they would see on other surfaces like Bermuda grass sand or Kentucky bluegrass. So not only are we talking about a cost savings in terms of what the long-term cost could be, which is where a lot of the discussion goes. But once you factor in the playable hours and look at that cost per use, the story around artificial turf becomes a lot more compelling. Woodward Academy in Georgia did a similar analysis before they installed their synthetic turf field, where they looked at something very similar, which was the total available hours as well as the cost per use. There obviously has been a plethora of pay-for-play facilities that have been opened in the US in the last 15 to 20 years that would have not been possible had they been 100% dedicated to natural grass. These surfaces are typically synthetic because they need to maximize the ROI of the facility, either with indoor facilities or outdoor facilities. One example being Starfire Sports in Seattle, Washington, that has a multitude of outdoor synthetic turf surfaces in a climate where obviously maintaining natural grass is more difficult. It's not impossible, it's harder to do. So when you're looking at how to maximize the revenue off that surface and how to decrease the cost per hour, synthetic turf presents a lot of benefits. And again, here's just a
Darren,
quote from my high
just a
school.
time, sorry, Darren,
No
just a
problem.
time check here. Yeah.
I think I'm on my last slide, Bruce.
Okay.
So there's just, here's in New Jersey, they're talking about, all these things about saving on maintenance, saving on plays. So, what typically comes back as industry comments, as industry says this, is more than backed up by our client base. There's a multitude of client facing, answers to these questions, and don't just take it from me. I encourage people to do the research. I encourage people to talk to our clients, and I believe that the proof is in the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And if you stop sharing, Darren, we'll go back to our regular screen. There we go. Fantastic. So let me just make one little program note. We had booked Jared Minnick, who is Director of Grounds and Environmental Management at the Maryland Soccerplex. He's also the founder and an instructor at the Maryland Soccerplex Sports Turf Institute. He is an advocate of natural grass fields. Jared, unfortunately, at the last minute was not able to join us. He, just before we started, 10 minutes before we started, sent me a written statement that he asked me to take a look at to see, in fact, if I could share it with you. I will do that before we go to Sun. I won't read it in its entirety, but there are a few passages that I know he wanted to share with the group. So I'll read in the middle of his statement that he always has a clear and consistent message. This was a statement that he was going to give to the group. Natural grass playing fields do not fail. Improper maintenance and/or outdated renovation and construction practices fail. Properly constructed and maintained grass surfaces can withstand much more use and abuse than many in industry and others believe. How is that possible? Technology and innovation are completely changing the business of maintaining high-use natural grass every single day. It is exciting, but is also not so complicated. In the Washington, D.C. area, an action as simple as changing the grass variety to one of the newest, most durable, and cold-tolerant varieties of Bermuda grass can allow a grass field to sustain against 25% more use without changing anything else. These new grasses are going on to golf course fairways and grass playing fields all around the area, and they are reducing irrigation requirements, fertilizer use, and even potentially eliminating pesticide use. Technology and innovation are changing how high-use natural grass fields are built as well. Maryland Soccerplex, which is where he works, publicized last week how they had just spent $2.1 million over the last 10 years on a project that made all 20 of their native soil natural grass fields essentially rainout proof. Heavy rains over the last few weeks have proven that as well, as Soccerplex fields have been open when most other natural grass fields in the area have been closed because of being too wet. All of those fields could be rainout proof too, for much less than it would take to replace them with synthetic turf. In dealing with poor quality natural grass playing surfaces, he notes, often I am met over with excuses from people trying to convince me that a natural grass field cannot survive, in quote, their situation. Yet over and over again, when we do an analysis of the playing surface and the maintenance program, the construction and/or maintenance ranks somewhere around a 1 on a scale of 25. If synthetic turf is 25 and there are still 23 other options that could be solutions, all for much lower of an investment, and they'll have a positive impact on the environment. Natural grass sequesters significant amounts of CO2 each year, especially natural grass that is maintained using technology and innovation that can also include very limited pesticide and a nearly full organic maintenance program. But to get to a place that a high-use natural grass field can meet the demand and be accessible, there must be a belief in progress and a desire to move beyond the status quo. It is possible. We do it each and every day on a very specific scale. No, natural grass fields are not always perfect, but neither are $1.2 million synthetic fields either. There are many high-profile failures of synthetic turf at all levels that illustrate that. So again, Jared Minnick, someone that's been involved in building natural grass fields for many years and is a principal at the Maryland Soccerplex, could not be here. He sends his regrets and asked if I would share what I just did with you. So with that, I want to proceed to our next panelist, Son Roesslein. Son, you can do a little bit more of an introduction of yourself and clarify how you're speaking tonight. And then after you present, Arno Harmson and Aaron Golembiewski of Turf Talents will come on. So Son, take it away.
Great, thanks so much, Bruce. Hello, Son Roesslein. I'm a certified sports field manager, work for Jefferson County School District out in Denver, like Bruce mentioned earlier. First of all, I'd just like to commend you for having the conversation. I think that often this conversation gets skipped over in many decision-making processes. So kudos to the group for being willing to have the conversation. As Bruce mentioned, I am currently the president of the Sports Field Management Association. Our association supports education and professionalism in sports field management and safety. We do not take a stance one way or the other. So our stance is that we're going to support the people who are maintaining the fields. And that is one thing that I will advocate for from an SFMA standpoint, is that regardless of the playing surface, you have an educated sports field manager on site. Okay, that put aside, I'm here actually to talk about my day-to-day lived experiences as a stadium manager here at Jeffco Schools. So I manage the North Area Athletic Complex, which is comprised of 2 stadiums side by side. We have a football stadium and then a soccer stadium. And it's a pretty unique setup, so a little bit of history about that. We in the district have centralized stadiums. So I'm not tied to one school. I'm tied to 6 schools, and they play all their home varsity matches at our facilities. So just going with a football example is pretty easy. You know, most teams have 8 home games a season. If that, we might have 8 games in 2 weeks. So we can host between 2 and 4 football games every single week for 10 weeks straight. We average 30 to 35 football games every fall. We average 100 soccer games between spring and fall. In Colorado, our sports are split up that fall is boys soccer, spring is girls soccer. And then in addition to all that, in the spring, we also host boys and girls lacrosse on the football field. So similar acreage to what y'all are looking at. We have about 4 acres of sports field surface, all natural grass. We are Kentucky bluegrass rye mix, which would be something similar, I believe, to what you would be looking at. And the great thing about the NAC is that it was built with sand base on the football field and sand cap on the soccer field. So that's important to note in the construction piece, is that a sand obviously is going to drain a lot better than a native soil. So when we talk about playability and rainouts and that type of stuff, having a sand base is going to really make a huge difference in that. And we notice that here on site. With our crazy schedule of back-to-back games, we don't have the luxury of rescheduling many games, especially not in football season. So we have no choice but to do what we have to do to make the field playable. And we feel like we do a pretty darn good job of it. Like I said, we don't actually have the the space in our schedule to move games around because of bad weather. So myself and my coworker, there's 2 of us here that manage the facility. In total, we're 14 acres, but like I said, 4 acres of sports fields. And so we're responsible for everything from cultivation, irrigation, painting, fertilization, mowing, and then we also manage the events in the evening. So interesting little layout there. But we are lucky in that we have the resources we need on site as far as equipment. That's another thing I would certainly encourage you to consider, is making sure that your field manager has the resources they need to be successful. You know, you can't really maintain a Lamborghini on a, Pinto budget, right? So if you want the highest level playing surface, then, it's going to be important to have a budget of resources that backs that up. And when I speak about us on natural grass, and I just kind of threw some numbers together, don't hold me to this. This is rough estimates of our just seed and fertilizer budgets. Our budget is comprised of all the stadium sites, not just my 2. So it's really hard to break down what's what, and I don't manage that piece. So what I can control and what I can tell you is what we've spent on seed and fertilizer over the last 24 years of our stadium is roughly $300,000. So about $16,000 a year, seed and fertilizer. I just mentioned that our stadium is 24 years old. We've never had a complete resurface. One time we've resurfaced the football field between the hashes from end zone to end zone, and that was due to our first lacrosse season. But so we put a lot of work and time and effort into maintaining our playing surfaces. And we're very lucky that we have the resources that we need in order to keep those surfaces at a high level. Practice was mentioned earlier. So we don't actually host practices here. We are varsity level, sometimes some JV games, but we don't have practices here. The teams do that at their school sites and then come play their competition here. But we still match about that 25 to 30 hour a week use just with games. So we're having double headers, triple headers, many nights of the week. And it gets fun on the fighting over who gets the Friday night football game, right? But so our stadium system, we're one stadium, there are 3 other locations, and there's another fully natural grass site, there's 1 synthetic site, and there's 1 hybrid site. I'm actually glad you brought that up, Darren, because I didn't even think to bring that up as well. But so limited knowledge on management there, but in talking with the field manager at that stadium site, that's working out pretty well. That's a soccer specific facility with the hybrid turf, and it was one of the early ones. early iterations of that. But that's working out pretty well. The synthetic site right now is 12 years old and recently tested unsafe. And at this point in time, it's closed for the spring season. So they typically host a lot of the lacrosse games. So we've over doubled our lacrosse schedule this spring. And again, like I said, we have the support to be able to, use sod slabs to replace the creases as needed so that, we're able to still maintain a safe field even with all that additional use. I think that was about all. And so I don't have like fancy graphs or presentation or anything for y'all. I'm just really here to talk to you about my lived experiences here. We have been awarded the Field of the Year twice, one for each field. So kind of gives you an idea on a national level that our peers recognized us as using our resources in an efficient way and providing a great playing surface as well. So I'm sure that there will be questions that come up later, but if there's anything specific about our stadium, our setup, I'd be happy to answer that too.
Well, thank you, son. I think folks might very well want to come back to you and Darren and Trey and ask questions in due course. But let's make sure we get all of our panelists in before we go to the questions and answers with the community and the discussion. So let's segue now to the team from Turf Talents. That's Arno Harmsen, the CEO, and Aaron Golembiewski, who is the Director, Head of Business Development for Turf Talents. Arno and Aaron, you both might want to do a quick introduction of Turf Talents and give everybody a little bit of a scene setter for who you are. I did very little by way of introducing you and mentioning you as panelists. So go ahead, take it away, and you can share your screen if you'd like.
Good evening, everybody. I am Aaron Golembiewski. Thank you, Bruce, for putting this together, and thank you for all the other speakers and coming here to talk with you and everybody else who's joining to learn a little bit more. Arno is also on here. We'll have him hop in a second. That way we don't do too much of a jumping back and forth. But I am the head of business development for Turf Talents. I came across Turf Talents 2 years ago now as a member of the Parks and Rec Commission here in Hastings-on-Hudson in Westchester County, when an individual came to us and said, yes, yeah. In New York, just north of the city. Yeah. In Westchester, we just assume everybody knows who we are. So, yeah. And maybe not. But so I was asked by an individual who said, we really need a synthetic turf field in this particular small village. We're having too many cancellations. Kids need to play all the time. And I said, wow, that makes a lot of sense. I've got a 6-year-old son who is a rabid soccer player. He is a madman out there. He does not mind the mud. He's good with it. But we do cancellations as a result. And so I went back to my wife, who is actually a leading landscape architect now, I guess, globally, since she's presenting at the Chelsea Flower Show soon in a couple months here. And she is a leading voice in sustainability and in green infrastructure. And she said, and I'll be frank, she said, you're out of your goddamn mind. And, I listened to her and I went and I found Turf Talents and I found Arno, because I was looking for something that blended the benefits of synthetic turf, which the gentlemen earlier were expounding upon, more playing time, more accessibility. And also, my wife's concerns. What do we do about ecology? How do we make sure that the substrate is alive? What do we do about the heat that's emanating off the field and how it's impacting the community around it? And I found Arno. So Arno, you want to hop in and say hello?
Yeah, I want to. Hi, I'm Arno Harmsen. I'm the CEO of Turf Talents. I moved a few years ago from the Netherlands to Canada. That's the accent you hear. I'm still have a few businesses in the Netherlands. I'm consultant for the Dutch national football soccer team, I have to call it. So I'm consultant for the Dutch Football Association, and I have seen over the last 14, 15 years, thousands of fields when I was consultant, and I always have seen the problems, I always have seen what caused the problems on the fields, and that's lack of knowledge and maintenance, and a lot of contractors who are cutting corners and don't do the right construction or maintenance. That was my role as a consultant project manager, to look after it. We came up with special programs for local communities to create better fields. And also I came up with a system called DrainTalent together with 2 engineers. Aaron will explain all about it later on. It's a system what solves a lot of problems on natural grass fields, and why people don't have to move as fast to a plastic field. So Aaron, it's up to you to show what we are capable of with DrainTalent, it's called the system, and hybrid turf.
Thanks, Arno. So I'm just going to go through a couple of slides and a couple of solutions that we bring to the table. We don't intend to convince anyone here tonight that you need to make a full-on switch on these fields. Our goal is to basically provide some new alternatives, some solutions that we think everyone should be considering, and we hope you'll reach out to us to learn more. That way, I'm going to try to keep our presentation as brief as possible in order to allow for questions and the other speakers to speak as well. So that is a good point. Chelsea Flower Show did ban artificial turf, Liam McAuliffe. That is a good point. Okay, so let me find my slides. Are you able to see them?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to quickly bounce over. There's a lot of information, and we'll talk more about those things if you have an interest and want to reach out to us. I did put turftalents.com in the conversation there. So hybrid turf is the first thing that we were going to discuss. It was mentioned earlier. Hybrid turf is this. So hybrid turf is a 5% plastic threading, a component that gets added to a fully natural grass field. There's a lot of research ongoing to change that plastic to actually a 100% plant material. It hasn't been achieved just yet, but people are pushing to do it. The idea is to add these threads into the ground, into your natural grass field, that it's roughly 95% grass still, and only these 5% threads that go down 18 centimeters into the ground. They are 2 centimeters above the ground. What happens is the grass roots find these threads and wrap around them to give you enhanced durability on your field. So you get up to 4 times more playing hours on a natural grass field. You're still capturing the carbon. You're still soaking up stormwater. You're not giving off the heat that you see in the plastic fields. And you get a lovely flat surface that many of the Premier League players prefer. They think it's just a great way to play soccer in particular, and it applies to all other sports as well. It makes for a great playing condition, and it's on Lambeau Field in Green Bay. It's on Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia. It's on Iowa State University's field. It hasn't caught on yet here in the United States to a large degree because of the domination of the artificial turf industry, that they're the one solution for you when you can't use natural grass anymore because you need more playing time. There are other options. That's our goal, to present them tonight. And we hope you reach out and learn more. But this is hybrid turf. There's many different providers. It's a great solution, again, to be almost completely natural. I always think of it as truly like a Toyota Prius at the end of the day, is you're almost there and you're still getting great gas mileage out of it. You're getting playing time for your 6-year-old, and your landscape architecture wife is pretty happy. I'm going to move off because, again, this is a short time period. These are a couple places that have hybrid turf. I've mentioned a few already, but now we're going to move to the DrainTalent. Arno is the co-creator of the DrainTalent. This is a good sketch of the DrainTalent here. The DrainTalent is a system that pulls water instantly from your field. Immediately. It is 8 times faster than the leading drainage system out there. This is verified by an independent university that works with the DrainTalent on research. Your field is instantly dry. In the middle of a huge rainstorm, it's dry, it's playable, it's ready to go. That water is pulled down. by this pump system that you see there, this black box, and then it is put into a cistern or it's put into a local retention pond. In the Netherlands, where I saw it, it would be put into the local canal and then water would be pulled from the canal. That's a bigger question. That's always an alternative. People have an option to how they want to deal with that water, but it pulls it out. And if you want to hold it, then it goes the other direction. It pumps the water back in at the root level. So what happens when you water from at the root level, you do not lose water from water evaporation from the sun. You don't lose it from wind and irrigation. You end up with a much more efficient use of water and a fully 100% circular system if you employ the DrainTalent in this way. So your fields are always ready to go. They are in lovely shape. And because that water is pulled off immediately, you don't really see a significant need for pesticides, herbicides, or insecticides because the grass grows well because it's happy being watered in the root zone, and there's no water pooling on the surface, which is where you see mold growth. And that's when you have to treat it with insecticides and pesticides. It's instantly pulled out of there. There's no capacity for it. So in the end, you have a huge reduction in chemicals, which you see with grass fields, unless you're going to treat them organically, and that's wonderful. Go for it. Do it. It's great. But if you end up pushing into the chemical side, you don't need to do that with the DrainTalent. And that is an absolute step forward that the Dutch and Arno were able to create. And again, this is pretty short. I walked through a couple of the benefits. And this is the last slide I'm going to show you, and then I'll let Arno talk a little bit more. But the Sparta Rotterdam is a Dutch professional soccer team. And at the end of all soccer games in the Netherlands, they ask the players to rate the quality of the field. And in 2022, on a grass field, no, I'm sorry, Arno, on a plastic field. It was an artificial turf field. My mistake. An artificial turf field in 2022, Sparta was dead last at a 1.25 rating across the entire season. They reached out to Arno and they asked him, how can we fix this? Because he had a pre-existing relationship with them before they decided to put in the plastic field. And they put in a DrainTalent and they put in hybrid turf, and Sparta Rotterdam went all the way up to number 3. It went from number 18 in the entire country all the way up to number 3, and Ajax and Feyenoord have significantly larger budgets than Sparta Rotterdam, which has the lowest budget of all Dutch teams. Went from last place on a plastic field all the way up to number 3 with a DrainTalent and hybrid turf. It was a huge jump. It's a really exciting field to look at. This is what it looked like in January. You can see how wonderful it is. It's green, it's lush. That is fed by the DrainTalent with hybrid turf. And we're gonna skip field factors for now, Arno, because we don't have an enormous amount of time, but I'll very quickly mention we are the exclusive partner with Field Factors, which just won an award from the World Economic Forum in water use. They are capturing water in a different way than what we highlighted earlier with that black bin. They are utilizing it throughout the entire space and turning it into active green infrastructure with native plantings that actually cleans the water to the point where it's practically potable. It can be used in all sorts of different capacities. It's pulling water from roofs, it's pulling water from parking lots and taking it down. It pumps it into the aquifer when it has excess water. It can pull from the aquifer when it needs water. And ultimately, it ends up being just an incredible green infrastructure. We're very happy to have partnered with them. So that's a picture outside of the Sparta Rotterdam field. And this was water that's being captured on the field that's getting pumped into this beautiful plant bed. This is the kind of thing that we can build around fields so that the entire community can enjoy a soccer field, a baseball field, and see its the benefits of it every day, not only for the kids who are playing on it, but also for people who just might be walking by those beautiful flower plantings. Arno, I'm going to let you hop in for a quick second.
Yeah, and Aaron and Arno, we're just about out of time, so.
Understood.
I will answer the questions in the chat. So I see there are a lot of questions. I will answer them right away. So
thank you, everybody.
Arno, yeah, if we can come back to the questions.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Are you guys good then? Anything else you want to add?
No,
we'll be around here at the end to answer any questions you may have, or just reach out to us. Thank you, everyone, for this tonight.
Great, thank you. And if you will drop down from your screen, the presentation will go back to the regular screen. If you want to, Aaron, stop sharing, that'd be great. So we're going to make then a transition to Melanie Taylor and John Amato. Melanie, again, is the CEO of the Synthetic Turf Council, and John is president of JJA Sports, and he consults for both synthetic and national turf fields. So Melanie, please go ahead.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm going to share my screen here. Everybody see that? Okay. Benefits of synthetic turf.
Yep.
Okay, so that's what I'm here to talk about today. So thank you. Good evening. My name is Melanie Taylor. I'm the president and CEO of the Synthetic Turf Council, and I'm really delighted to be here again and invited here again for this discussion and to talk about the benefits of synthetic turf, including how it's accessible year-round, affordable to maintain, and environmentally sustainable through reduced water and chemical usage. So just a quick slide about STC. We're a 501c6 trade association, and our mission is to lead, educate, and advocate for the synthetic turf industry. We represent over 170 member companies, including synthetic turf manufacturers, component suppliers, builders and installers, landscape architects, such as John Amato here, testing labs, maintenance providers, and other specialty service companies. The STC is a resource for current, credible, and independent research on the safety and environmental impact of synthetic turf, as well as provider of technical guidance on the selection, installation, maintenance, and environmentally responsible disposal of synthetic turf. So here's a quick look at our latest guidelines and updates. On the left is an infill containment poster and checklist to help prevent the spread of microplastics. And on the right is an updated guide for the essential elements to be included as an objective and non-proprietary guide for specification of synthetic turf. Both of these documents are available and free on our website. I'm happy to share the link to that. But communities, schools, businesses, and families across the country are choosing synthetic turf because of its significant benefits in water savings, performance, durability, customization, and accessibility. The STC estimates between 18,000 and 19,000 synthetic turf sports fields installed in North America today, and approximately 1,200 to 1,500 fields are installed annually, and about half of those are replacements. So the STC advocates for synthetic turf as a reliable option for safe and sustainable play spaces, and especially if surface consistency and increased play time is important for the application, the users, and the community. So overall, synthetic turf expands the ability for fields to endure year-round play without rest or intensive maintenance. As an industry, we believe that each community knows best their own needs and constraints and should have the right to choose a surface that best fits their needs. So if you are considering synthetic turf, there are significant environmental benefits to keep in mind. I'll just briefly go through these. First and foremost, obviously, synthetic turf greatly reduces water. One full-size synthetic turf sports field, as you heard, can save over 1 million gallons of water each year. Secondly, the use of synthetic turf reduces the need for toxic chemicals. The EPA has identified runoff of toxic pesticides and fertilizers as a principal cause of water pollution. Considering synthetic turf as a sustainable option eliminates the need for nearly 1 billion pounds of harmful pesticides, fertilizers, fungicides, and herbicides. And as a quick follow-up to the part 1 of webinar a couple weeks ago, just want to make it clear that synthetic turf recycling is happening today. This project photo is from Shaw Sports Turf, and Trey's here and available to update on the number of synthetic turf fields that they have recycled to date. So in addition to environmental benefits, synthetic turf greatly expands an area's functionality and increases access to countless kids. Nobody questions that the more time our kids and athletes spend outdoors, the healthier they are physically, mentally, and emotionally. Synthetic turf allows families and athletes to enjoy the benefit of year-round play, even in the most inclement of weather conditions. And moreover, synthetic turf provides a space for multi-purpose competition, allowing several sports to be played on a single field. Not to mention, synthetic turf also provides many benefits in underserved areas where resources for athletic and play fields are limited. It also allows communities and households to reduce costs and be judicious with their resources. In 2021, a comparative study found that on average, the cost of 40 events per year on natural grass fields was just over $1,300. Synthetic turf brings that cost per event down significantly. So the average annual cost of having 1,000 events on synthetic turf is just under $4. So these costs are on a 10-year usage cycle, showing that synthetic turf stands the test of time and saves community money in the long run. So known for their durability and long lifespans, synthetic turf fields also save communities money and time and maintenance. So per STC guidelines, there are many considerations for owners to make prior to purchase, everything from budget, sport applications, design, installation, ownership, maintenance protocols, expectations, testing, protecting, and finally, your recycling options. So as it relates to player safety, we are committed to the quality and safety of our products. Synthetic turf provides a reliable and consistent playing surface when properly maintained. And in fact, a study, as I mentioned last time, from Orthopedic Journal of Sports Medicine found that there was no significant difference in ACL injuries for NCAA soccer players during matches on natural grass and turf. So in closing, we're committed to the safety of synthetic turf systems as good stewards of the environment and to the DC communities that use synthetic turf every day. Thank you so much for your time.
Great, Melanie. Thank you. Thank you very much. John, we're going to segue quickly to you as we're moving through the presentations and maybe just do a little bit more of an introduction than I provided at the top. Hi, John. Just take yourself off mute. Yeah. There you go.
Okay, you can hear me now, right?
Yep.
My name is John Amato. I'm a professional civil engineer. I've had and I'll call it a luxury because I've had a blast. I've been designing athletic facilities since 1991. And the best thing about the work I do is opening day. It is a lot of fun to see people utilizing the facilities that you design. One thing that is very important, there was a great deal of information and I thought it was fantastic. I love the hybrid systems. We did one many, many years ago at the GFC Owens facility in Ohio State. And that was the first one and the only one that I've done. But I was very impressed with the idea. I don't know how long it lasted, but I know in the end they probably mowed it out because anxious turf cutters, grass cutters, would have moved it. The reason I'm here is to talk about standards, and boring, and I'm going to put up this a graphic which is just a list, and it's meant to be boring on purpose. We don't need pretty pictures. What we need to do is understand is that while everybody is designing and building and maintaining their systems and coming up with new ideas, it all comes down to standards and complying with standards. Because playing on a turf field that hasn't been constructed to standards and hasn't been maintained to standards results in a very poor field. I've been involved in coming onto projects where fields have failed because they weren't maintained properly. And schools have to spend a lot of money to reverse that practice. And in the end, what we find, and it's more and more each and every year, is that more and more schools are requiring more and more work out of less and less people when it comes to maintenance. And I really see it in the outdoor field area. But standards are very important. And what is a standard and why is it important? I've been very involved with ASTM for about 25 years. ASTM is a consensus standards organization. And they create standards that are intended to make things better. And I like to think that we do that with our standards. And I'm going to just give you a couple examples of how standards come about and will help you understand why they're important. And I'm going to hit to the heart of not performance, but of concerns about synthetic turf. And I think it's important because the performance will come next. Back in 2005 in New Jersey, there was testing done on 2 AstroTurf fields and they found lead in the fibers. And the lead was there. It wasn't like it wasn't put there. It wasn't like there was a pile of lead chromate in a factory that just disappeared. People who were doing that, making that product, were utilizing that lead chromate. When people found out about it, they was like, oh, it wasn't me, but it was them. And what we did is we sat down with the Synthetic Turf Council. They were very young at that point. And we sat down with the Consumer Product Safety Commission. And we told them how we could create a standard that would allow people to test fiber for lead content. And we could do it in a manner that it would maintain a minimum or a maximum amount of lead at 100 grams, 100 parts per million. And that's the toy standard. And that's the standard that the standards that we create try to mimic. Standards for children. Many years later, the same thing came about with crumb rubber. And they were looking at canceling crumb rubber as an option for infill. So we developed a test standard that looked at heavy metals. And the heavy metals testing that we did was actually the toy standard that was put together many years ago to protect children. I'm going to put up my list so you don't have to see me talking. But these are some standards that exist today to make fields better. ASTM F355 is impact attenuation for synthetic turf mostly, but they use it for other surfaces as well. This 963 is the toy standard. And we basically took that standard and we made it work for testing rubber particles. We create standards for particle size, which comes to creating those special fields that, was it Arnott? Is that how to say his name properly? I apologize if I didn't. So these standards help people make better fields. 1936 is an impact attenuation that was upgraded, how to test a field. And it's been used for a long time now where they've moved on to HIC, head injury criteria. And that's being done as a standard. The total lead test that you see 2765, that was set initially at 300 parts per million so that they had time to change it. And in 3 years, they reduced it to 100 parts. And in fact, all the manufacturers in the United States that produce product, synthetic turf fiber, they're well below that. They're 50, 30, maybe 10 parts per million, way below the toy standard. So these standards that people create are very valuable to health and safety on a field, how it performs, concerns for parents. We did an extractable metals test, and that was the hazardous metal test. That was 3188. I want to go down a little further. We've got a test that we're working on. It's done actually and approved. PAHs. And that test standard was a little different than the other ones because we went out to Europe and worked with them on the REACH standards. And we've got 8 PAH compounds. And then we have only 8. There are many more. We have only 8 because if any of the 8 are in the sample, then the other ones are in it. So we really don't have to test for the other ones. So we test for the 8. That was the program from REACH. It's very good. What we're working on right now is one for PFAS. It's going to follow EPA 1633, which came out in January of 2004. And what we have to do is figure out a test preparation effort that allows us to sample consistently from one fiber manufacturer, one system to another, so we get consistent results. But the goal is to reduce, and I'm not sure you can eliminate, but to reduce the PFAS that's in the fibers. Now, it all comes down to standards, but now we're going to talk a little bit about design and performance. All the standards and all the complaints.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just I'm just mindful of time, so just take another couple of minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'll use a couple minutes and that'll be it. The standards you see before you are FIFA standards. They're very important FIFA standards. Ball rebound, ball roll, shock absorption, vertical deformation, rotation resistance. These give you very important data points for understanding how they perform. And where they came about is in Europe, they wanted to create synthetic turf fields that performed like the best of the soccer fields. So they developed a way to test the natural grass fields and then applied it to synthetic turf to get the same performance. So all along the way, and through my involvement with sports design, we've been trying to make them better. And I think we've come a long way. The standards provide good quality fields as long as they're built to the standards. So if you don't have these in your specification, you won't have the benefit that I give my clients when it comes to quality of product, quality of surface, how the surfaces respond together. You can't just put a pad under a field and hope it behaves well. There's a lot of design that goes into it. Let's see what else we've got here. I think that that's about it that we have to cover. And the other stuff is a recoup. So I think I got it done in what, 6 minutes you gave me? Or maybe eight?
Thereabouts. Yeah, I appreciate that, John. Thank you so much. And if anyone
Okay.
has questions about standards, we can come back and probe those in the Q&A. But
Thank you.
I want to go to our last presenters, Kristen Mello and Dinah Conway. Kristen, if you want to go ahead and just reintroduce yourself briefly, and then and give us your remarks.
Sure, and I'll share my screen, so you just confirm when you can see it, okay?
Yep.
And let's hope this works. Fingers crossed. Can you see it?
It does.
Okay. And is it sharing the whole screen?
Yep.
Oh, rock on. Okay. So my name, thank you, is Kristen Mello, and I am in Westfield, Massachusetts. You'll notice from the sound of my voice that that is not near Boston. We're out in the western part of the state where we still have our R's. And I am the director and co-founder of Westfield Residents Advocating for Themselves. As I said, Westfield is in Western Mass, and that is just one town north of the little divot in between Connecticut and Massachusetts, where the border is otherwise relatively straight. We are known for our black squirrels, and the thing about us is that we have an Air National Guard base here, and it sits on top of our aquifer. And because of decades of firefighting training, our water was polluted with PFAS contaminants. So we are also currently, some of my PFAS advocacy work resulted in my being elected a city councilor at large in the city of Westfield, because if you mention a problem, you usually end up with a job about it. And so I ended up elected in 2019 and re-elected in 2021 and 2023, but I never speak for the city of Westfield, only for myself. Now, right now, the city of Westfield is looking at some turf and some playing field options. And the thing is, we have exactly the same kind of concerns that everyone else does. We want safe fields. We want durable fields. We want to maximize our hours of playtime. We want to minimize the downtime of these fields. We want to improve our reputation. Our reputation is that we have poorly maintained fields here in unplayable conditions that are not, really grassy and soft. And it's been this way for years. We don't fund our education system the way we need to in our parks and rec. So we've had this history of poor maintenance. We want to be able to host events and competitions. We want to have camps and tournaments just like everybody else. We want our athletes protected. We want our spectators protected. We want our neighbors in the surrounding community protected. And we want to protect our taxpayers from liability, lawsuits. We don't want to spend good money after bad for rehabbing our fields. And especially because of our PFAS pollution, we don't want pollution here. We don't want to ask for any more pollution. And because these fields are impervious surface, and Westfield is a city that has two rivers joining in its center, we are very concerned with impervious surface and flooding. So the thing about it is that because my education and background is in analytical chemistry, and because I am an outspoken PFAS advocate, a lot of people who get PFAS testing will call me and ask me to talk with their communities about their water tests, their blood tests, testing for turf. They want to ask an analytical chemist what lab reports means. And so when I speak to a community, we talk about all the different costs and all the different factors that we need to take into account. So for example, we want to talk about injuries. We want to talk about the liability that you get when you have these injuries. We want to talk about, when other teams come here, is that going to be a problem? What temperature are we allowed to have people on these fields? We want to talk about, say, up at our high school, they're talking about 3.5 acres of fields to rehab there. And if we were to change it from admittedly poorly maintained grass into plastic, how much heat is that going to put on the surrounding environment? And when it is hot, are we going to need to cool that with water? And when we do, where will that water run off? And when it does, what will be in it? And so these conversations, they sort of build, because there are costs that don't get factored in by the engineers that bring us these projects. We want to talk about the air pollution that happens, not just in our community, but in the communities where these materials are produced and where they get disposed of. We need to talk about the fact that soil is a living, dynamic entity with a lot of different organisms in it, where many biological processes happen, right? This is where, material gets broken down and recycled in our natural ecosystem. And so replacing all of that territory with plastic and, with mechanical components, stone, and then you've got this pad layer, right? You don't have the earth and the oxidation reduction reactions and the decomposition reactions and the mold and the fungus and, the worms, right? You don't have any of that insect material. So you lose habitat, you lose biodiversity, you lose the production of oxygen, and, you lose your ability to sequester your carbon. And again, in Westfield, you end up with that increased flood risk. And so the real question we have to consider, especially here, is that if the reason for our awful fields is lack of maintenance, how are we going to maintain the plastic fields? And if we're not adequately maintaining the fields we have now, what is the guarantee that we're going to fund the system that needs to be maintained in the future in order to preserve this investment? And if we were going to fund it so that we could preserve this investment, then why wouldn't we fund to preserve the investment of the natural grass fields that have all of these other health and ecological environmental benefits to the community? And in case you're wondering, I spoke fast for a reason, because there were a few points that need to be cleared up. The first of which is that Salt Lake City gets an average of less than 20 inches of rainfall a year. So for them to save all that water is a really big deal. But here in Massachusetts, we get 48.5 inches of rainfall every year. And so that's not really our problem. And so these considerations are site specific. If you are in a place with a lot of buildup, a lot of impervious surface, high density, not a lot of rural area, well, then you need to protect your green space. You need to protect the natural environment you have. BWI, by the way, gets 43.5 inches per year. I looked it up. Also, water is a sacred resource, and it is scarce, but clean water is even more scarce. Clean water is scarce. Polluted water you can find everywhere. Also, with respect to 25 to 35 hours per week, both Marblehead and Springfield have natural grass, high-frequency use turf fields. It's in the Tory reports that were mentioned at your last meeting, and they have more playtime than you have said that you needed. Also, when players have an extrinsic risk factors that you want to control, you definitely do not want to expose them to extra endocrine disrupting compounds, especially as teenagers. And my last point, and this is a big one, when we talk about science, it is never a good idea to only get your science from the people trying to sell you something. Every community needs to look at Google Scholar, needs to call their local academics, needs to look at peer-reviewed literature, look at the author information, and look at the funding information and the conflict information. Yes, I have a study. Who paid for it, right? Is it a cohort? Is it on adults or is it on teenagers, right? There was a study in 2021, and it's published in the Current Orthopedic Practice, Volume 32, Issue number 4, page 255. Overall, athletes were 58% more likely to sustain injuries on artificial turf than natural grass. 7 orthopedic specialists analyzed 953 injuries from 26 high schools, just high schools, not adults. For every category, lower extremity, upper extremity, torso, football, boys soccer, girls soccer, and rugby, they found more injuries with artificial turf versus grass, and every comparison showed high statistically significant patterns. In many categories, injury risk was twice with artificial turf versus grass. Look at where your information is coming, ask a lot of questions, and research for yourself. Thank you for my time.
Thank you, Kristen. And finally, we're going to go to Diana Conway, who's president of Safe Healthy Playing Fields. Diana, you'll be our last presenter, and then we'll go into Q&A and discussion with the community.
So I'm withstanding between everybody and the questions they want to throw at the speakers. Thanks very much. Hi, my name is Diana Conway. I am president, as Bruce said, of Safe Healthy Playing Fields, which is a 501c3 all volunteer nonprofit. We are not making any money off of this project. We are taking time away from our families and our pets. And we started in 2019 because after almost 10 years of advocacy as a loose coalition, we realized this was unsustainable because people kept reaching out to us saying, oh my God, we just found out they're putting this in at my school, my park, my kids' preschool. Can you help us? And it was clear there was a need. We started trying to fill it. So I didn't know I was going to be a panelist until a couple hours ago. I do not have a slide deck, but I have been doing this work for many years. And so I'm going to try to go through the broad framework that we use for all the communities we try to help. To make it memorable, I like to compare artificial turf to a bad relationship. I think most people on here have had at least or seen one bad relationship, and it's similar because of 5 things: too hot, toxic, high cost, high injury, and you can't get rid of it. So heat, toxicity, cost, injury, and disposal. And in the intervening 10 plus years that I've been working on this, the science has piled up on our side in favor of grass and against plastic fields. I try to use the word plastic fields to differentiate because the word turf should be used to refer to turf grass, which is something that grows in living soil, as we were just hearing about. So in terms of heat, the idea that you're going to be able to use these fields incessantly because there's so much playtime available on a synthetic product with climate change, and yesterday's paper talking about how heat waves are going to be longer and slower moving, it seems unlikely that we're going to continue to see any kind of increase in artificial turf use. Right now, there are no standards. The Synthetic Turf Council and none of the Parks or Recs Department that we've been able to find have even suggested any kind of standard for safety, especially for children, beyond things like best judgment is what, excuse me, what's often referred to. That seems like a very weak standard. And the Sports Illustrated in October 2022 had a cover story on heat and football, high school football fatalities, and specifically mentioned artificial turf as a key issue with a disproportionate impact on Black players who tend to be the bigger, heavier players. So that's just heat. Toxicity has been talked about a fair amount. There's toxicity to the athletes and to the environment. You're also losing, as someone mentioned, the CO2 sequestration. You're losing the water infiltration, and you're losing the cooling effect and exchanging it for a heating effect. In terms of something like PFAS, Ms. Taylor from Synthetic Turf Council wrote a letter this past June to the state legislature in California, objecting to a bill that was before the legislature, saying that it should slow down the removal of PFAS, a requirement that PFAS not be in artificial turf because her members need it to manufacture their product. To me, that says it's in the products. Recently, the Philadelphia Inquirer ran a year-long series on a series called Forever Fields, how Pennsylvania became a dumping ground for used artificial turf fields. And one specific part of that series was a profile of a city that bought what they were told by the seller was a PFAS-free field, but had it tested by experts, some of whom have been working with us. And we're told, well, yeah, it's PFAS-free if you only test to this, crappy standard. Yeah, if you put the threshold high enough, you won't find anything. So there's a certain lack of transparency amongst at least some of the industry actors. In terms of lead that was mentioned, so yes, 2005 was when they found the lead in that New Jersey field. 2007 is when the Attorney General of California, Jerry Brown, sued FieldTurf and AstroTurf and Beaulieu, 3 companies that had lead in their plastic fields in the hundreds of parts per million. And they slowly eventually came to a settlement that said, okay, we'll go down from there. So the idea that this industry is, trying to look out for the safety of children or athletes is, there's some issues there. We have a great video clip, one of my favorites from 2016, when the representative from FieldTurf was before the Maryland State Legislature and was asked by a legislator in a hearing, is there lead in your product? And he started talking about lead in strawberries and lead in his shirt. And finally, the clip is very quick. It says, yes, there is lead in our product. That was 2016. Nobody's ever come back to us after we cite that and said, oh, look, lead-free. And I'd be happy to see it. That'd be great. But nobody's found time to do that. In terms of cost, I'll just say grass is very honest. And if you're underfunding it, it will not do well. The head of Brock, which is a big company that makes a lot of the pads underneath, BROCK, guy named Dan Sawyer, was interviewed in one of our videos, which I will put in the chat later, saying that artificial turf always looks great, but the problem is they don't maintain it. And he said in this video, he talks about how the standard is grass. Grass is safest. Grass is what athletes want. But artificial turf looks good and feels good when it's new, and then they don't maintain it. So for example, the GMAX, the impact attenuation, initially the industry was accepting 200, a GMAX of 200, which is considered risk of life-threatening injury, like a skull fracture. About 10 years ago, the industry advised, and by industry, I'm sorry, I mean the trade association, advised that it should be 175, and then that was brought down to 165. My understanding is that grass, depending on humidity, is between 85 and 120. So that gives you a range of aspects. And it wasn't in my community in Montgomery County, it wasn't until parents started testing it themselves that the school system then started saying, okay, well, we'll test it once a year. Well, the NFL tests their field for GMAX before every single game, all over the field. Do you think your kids' schools are going to get that? How do you know that field is safe? It looks fine. It looks fine. The kids don't advocate for themselves. They want to play. Same for the heat. The kids don't want to advocate for themselves. They don't want to be taken out of the game. Dr. Brindle and Mr. Gill both referred to some studies. Mr. Gill put up a Montgomery County study, which I think was dated to 2011, but I apologize if I have that wrong. Mr. Brindle referred to some high school studies. The one thing about the NFL studies or the NCAA versus high school is that certainly NFL is under union standardized standards for review of plays and injuries. High school, every high school coach has a different injury culture. So even if you're looking at study after study after study across high schools, what in one study might be called a concussion and in another is a game delay for a kid who's taken out for 10 minutes. So those are very hard to really rely on. And for example, I will cite Dr. Greg Guyton, who's the orthopedic surgeon for the Ravens, who has testified with us several times in Annapolis, saying only a few articles in the literature reported a higher overall injury rate on natural grass compared with artificial turf. And I'm quoting here, and all of these studies received financial support from the artificial turf industry. That was May 2022. This is, again, the American Journal of Sports Medicine, peer-reviewed, published study. He said the same thing in 2020 and in 2019 when he accused the Synthetic Turf Council and its industry representatives of misusing the data that he had helped collect on the NFL, called it cherry picking, and said that that the only studies to the contrary were by a single researcher, a non-physician paid over $1 million by the industry for his research that consisted of selecting his own cohorts from within the NFL study. So he gets to pick which teams he's going to compare. That is not a study that stands up to science. So I would like to put a lot of these clips, these citations in the, in the chat. I also have a nice video in terms of Dan Bond, who was Ms. Taylor's predecessor in 2019, explaining how there was going to be a recycling facility anytime now in the Mid-Atlantic. And then one of the legislators said, so where is that going to be? And he said, well, it's in Denmark. Well, as the legislator pointed out, that's not in the Mid-Atlantic. And it was a charming moment, but the point remains that for over 10 years, the industry has been saying we're about to start recycling this stuff any minute, so go ahead and buy it. Ms. Taylor's industry.
Hey, Diana, just let me jump in. Just take another minute because I want to get to Q&A.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I'll make two more points. The Synthetic Turf Council had a 2013 and then a 2015 update and then a 2017 update. of guidelines on reuse, removal, reuse, repurposing, recycling, and I'm not sure another word in there, of used turf systems. The last one was updated in 2017. First of all, it's all advisory. Second, they recommend a chain of custody, but for the last 5 years, Ms. Taylor and her predecessor came to Annapolis repeatedly to testify against a chain of custody bill, which we were actually finally just able to pass after 6 years of fighting for something that they themselves have recommended and which their documents actually have samples of. So that was a little confusing to us. And then there's a 2018 Zembla investigative report out of Europe called the Turf Mountain, which has just staggering video of mountains of used rolls. We don't have to go to Europe to see them. We've got them all over Pennsylvania, right up the road from me, and they're all over Washington State, and they're all over the rest of the country, preferably in somebody's backwoods because the stuff is heavy and bulky. A lot of landfills won't take it. A lot of incinerators don't want that much, and it gums up the equipment. The pieces are too big. So what's cheap? Well, we'll put it over there. So I have a lot of issues with some of the players in this industry. I think many of them are trying to do the right thing. They think they've got a good idea. I'm here to tell the communities what Kristen Mello just said. Look carefully because things sound good up front. They're appealing. The ribbon cutting for sure is fun. I mean, no matter what kind of field. But there are a lot of issues with this. And once they're in, you're there. It's an unfunded mandate every 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 years. And it's an invisible threat that is becoming more and more understood. So thank you very much. I'll start putting, can I start putting links in the chat or do you want to wait somehow?
You can send them to me afterwards and I'll be sure that we distribute them to everybody. You can
Okay.
put them in the chat now. Go ahead. That's fine,
Okay.
but I can also distribute them afterwards.
Sure.
There's a lot in that, Diana, and a lot of the presentations that I know panelists might want to respond to in some fashion. I do want to get the community in for their questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll come to you. And while I'm waiting for you to do that, I want to ask a question very specifically about cost. And Son, if I can come back to you, you mentioned costs for fertilizer and seed, $16,000 a year over 24 years. But let me ask you this question. I'm going to put you on the spot. If you can't answer it, don't worry. And that is, what does it cost to build a natural grass playing field, let's say a football field? And I've got the maintenance cost, but in terms of building one, and Darren or Trey Brindle from Shaw or FieldTurf, what does it cost to build one using artificial turf? So Son, go first.
Sure. I wish that there were a clear-cut answer to that, like X amount per square foot or something like that. But, drainage is going to be an addition, the depth of your sand base or native soil. So there's all kinds of different iterations there. And then, of course, regionality is going to come into play as well. So I honestly really can't give you a good example there. I would just recommend going to a local educator who was going to be impartial and objective in helping to find some of those localized costs.
Would you have, though, even, Son, a ballpark range of constructing a natural turf field? Let's say it's a football field. Is it? I know I'm probing here. Is it $300,000? Is it $2 million? What ballpark? Any idea?
The latest actual figures that we have from the association standpoint are super outdated. So I wouldn't even venture to guess what that would be now.
Okay.
I'd hate to be misquoted and give false information. So
I understand. Arno, let me ask you the same question about natural grass, or Aaron. You guys have been in this business. You're in this business now. I'm not talking about your hybrid turf. I'm talking about natural grass. What would a football field or a soccer field, because obviously football, European, soccer, American, Arno has great familiarity with that. What would you say in terms of the cost of building one?
It depends also on the local situation. So I agree with Son. It's hard to say what the cost will be, but a field with a DrainTalent, on an average, I would say roughly 500,000.
Okay.
roughly. So.
Just as a ballpark, and I know Scott, and your last name, I don't know if I captured it, just put 400K for a grass field in the chat. Doug Wernell, you may have a figure because I know you do this business, but let me go to the artificial turf folks. Darren, in your case, you're in
I'm sorry, I'm just going to jump in because I've talked to Jared Minnick about this, and he said you could put all the bells and whistles in on a grass field, and you would be hard pressed to spend $400,000. And he knows how to build bells and whistles.
That is bullshit.
Okay, so there'll be some differences on this property, but Darren, let me go to you. If you could, just give us a cost of an artificial turf field that's a football field or a soccer field.
Yeah, it's clear. I mean, as Son said, there's a lot of local variables in terms of typically the sub-base build, so I can give you a better answer on kind of what's happening above the sub-base. But if you had a budget of 1.2 million, you could build a synthetic turf field with a sub-base these days. But that's a ballpark that doesn't include some of the local site soil issues or union labor. So there's certainly some variables, and every two fields are none are the same. So from that standpoint, I think there are some variables, but obviously that's why guys like John Amato and Doug Warnell assist clients in helping make the right decision in terms of what they should be building, whether it's natural or synthetic.
Yeah, and again, I understand. We're just trying to get some sense of this for the community that's attending tonight, right? We're not going to hold anybody to a figure. But just let me ask this question, Darren, what's the Lafayette Field ballpark going to cost?
That's a good question. Honestly, Bruce, I'm not sure. Certainly, I would also lean on the client. This is their dollars and certainly what they're going to spend. So I wouldn't speak on behalf of any of our clients in terms of how much they spend on things. But also, I honestly don't even know the answer. I couldn't even give you a range because I'm not sure on that specific account. But I'd certainly encourage you to work with with Lafayette to help get that information out to the public.
Okay, very good. Kevin, you have your hands up, so go ahead and ask your question. I'm unmuting you.
Thank you. Hi, Kevin Shives, a community member and Lafayette parent, just here, personal capacity learning. Thanks for having a balanced panel with a lot of different perspectives here, and I heard about the last session as well. I think like thinking through a lot of the discussion in the chat and also a lot of the presentations today, part of me feels that this is sort of a little bit of an alternate universe we're hearing because we're in a small-ish field that has a very, very heavy use at Lafayette. It's a field that is a rec center, that is an athletic field, that is a school recess place, that is a casual play place. It's all of these things in one. And, I'm worried about the usability of anything and related to even the best possible natural grass solutions maintained by, private industry as well. A lot of the places we're hearing from tonight are privately operated fields like Maryland Soccerplex and the like. In our corner of DC, we're in a place with a very underfunded DC Parks and Rec service and DC General Services without maintenance funds, no matter how much we push and have pushed over the last 10 years for them to be able to maintain that field. And so, part of me worries as well about our ability to be able to even advocate for those resources longer term. DCPR has, understandably prioritized lower income wards for a lot of the maintenance and park facilities costs. So there's a part of me that wonders if the smartest solution for our community is actually one that favors artificial turf and some of the usability issues that are and needed there. And so I guess a question is for anyone in here who has done this in a public environment through a government managed, field. What has that experience been like? How is that actually different than doing that in a place that receives less use than our field would at Lafayette, at least the athletic field, and it's not managed privately. So that's, I guess, my question, if there's experience on the panel from that sort of dynamic.
And this will be a question then, because you've premised it in terms of the durability, playability of artificial turf. Are you asking more specifically, Kevin, about natural grass being an alternative?
Yeah, I mean, how does
so
that work in a government managed, DC, city parks and rec situation with very little commitment towards maintenance funds, which I don't think is going to be coming to DC, this part of DC anytime soon.
So, Son, I know you're operating your natural grass fields. If you want to take that question in the context in which Kevin presented it.
I think I can kind of answer in that, we're a public school district. So I would assume roughly similar dynamics as far as budgets. We're fairly limited on actual dollars to spend, and where we make up for that is in our increased knowledge and using our resources to the best ability that we have. So I'm going to go back again to making sure that there's a knowledgeable person who's responsible for maintaining those fields. And that's really where you're going to get the best bang for your buck, regardless of what the vehicle is. And I will pass it over to Kristen. I saw that she had a hand up and maybe has a better answer from the city side than me.
Go ahead, Kristen, and weigh in, and then I want to go to Patty Myler for her question.
Sure, and thank you. It's a great question, and I would say that actually at your last panel, you had the information presented. TURI, the Toxics Use Reduction Institute in Massachusetts, has case studies at municipalities with high frequency use fields. Both Springfield and I think the other one is Marblehead have numbers of hours played that are higher than what you're looking for here. So I would direct you to Bruce's last, on your website, right? There's a link to the last presentation and the slides that are in there, and the TURI information is included. And if you can't find it, reach out because I'll share it with you.
Yeah, well, I'll share TURI's information with the group. I did invite them to come tonight, and this happens to be the night of their annual meeting or something of that sort, and so they were all occupied and couldn't come. But I'll share that information. They actually weren't in the prior presentation, but we can share that. We can share that information because indeed there are a number of fields across Massachusetts that are examples of sustainable use. Yeah.
There are, and Springfield is one of the more challenged communities out here in Western Massachusetts. So they are not historically very well funded, and it is high use here.
Right, right. Patty Myler. Patty, you can join us. Go ahead, and if you want to come on video, that's fine. You just want to take.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
There you go.
I don't want to keep beating a dead horse. And Kevin brought up the fact that, you know, some of the funds that might go to our area might be used in other parts of the city. That's not true. The problem is that the department, the DGS, does not maintain any fields. And if we really think that they're going to maintain this field the way it should be maintained, as was brought up in the conversations, it is not going to happen. I have maintained as a facilities director of a private school, both turf and grass fields, and I know they can both be maintained, but they take work, and DGS has to step up and be willing to maintain. And I happen to know that they do not have the equipment to maintain turf fields currently.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions from the community? I'm open to taking your questions. We have another 8 minutes or so until we close. May I ask the panelists while we're waiting for the question? Okay, Yuri, go ahead, please. Just take yourself off mute, Yuri.
Yep.
There you go.
Just curious, do we have a sense of what the budget is for this project, both on the capital side, on the improvements, and on the maintenance side? Has there been any discussion or disclosure from DGS or DPR? I guess I asked the question because when we did this, 10 years ago with the school renovation, right? We replaced the field. And the question was asked at one of the ANC meetings, is there any budget to maintain these? And the response from DPR and DGS was a uniform no. And the community pushed for grass. We got grass. We were told it was going to be installed correctly. It wasn't, whatever, right? But my fear is that given the same budget constraints, right, we're going to end up, we'll push for grass, we'll get it. And then in a year and a half, we'll end up in the same spot where you've got dirt piles, pockmarked turf, weeds, tripping hazards all over the place, and basically a field that's unusable. And so I'll just leave that here. Do we have any sense of what the budgets are?
No, Yuri, we don't. Again, this is a little bit of inside baseball for folks on the call who are not from our area. DGS is the Department of General Services. They're the ones that contract with companies like Darren's, FieldTurf, Tarkett Sports for the field at Lafayette Elementary School. Our council member, Janice Lewis George, that represents our area in the district government, has asked for specific cost information from the Department of General Services, from DC Public Schools, Department of Parks and Recreation. So this is all a process of discovery at this point. She's also asked for detailed cost comparisons between an artificial turf field and a natural turf field. So there's a lot going on there that I can separately and later on after this call share the letters and so forth that she has sent to the city and the city's replies. But Yuri, we don't have a figure for that. It's coming, hopefully. Maria Bartlett, please go ahead.
Hi, is there generally when a artificial field is retired or replaced, is there a charge to dispose of that field? And generally, you know, for like a football field, how much would that charge be?
Darren, you want to take that? And then Diana? Let Darren go first.
Absolutely. I think what's been highlighted, and certainly, you know, I appreciate, Diana, the effort that you put into what you do. I think it helps keep our industry honest. You know, I'm disappointed and sad to see some of the links that you've shared with respect to some of my competitors and what they've been doing with artificial turf that's supposed to be recycled. It's unfortunate. It's and it upsets me. I do want to be transparent that I believe our industry right now is at a tipping point when it comes to recycling. I think the recycling world is going at a certain pace. I think at one point we were way behind. I think we've caught up. With respect to cost, in many cases at this point, there is tremendous cost savings to the client where the infill can be treated and reused and the carpet can be salvaged and turned into recycled plastic lumber. So this is a cost that would be borne not by the initial installer, but by the installer who is replacing the field. Obviously, there's a lot of companies that weren't around 10, 12, 15 years ago. So, you know, I wouldn't put the trust in those companies that would guarantee it up front, but upon removal, that's where those companies, especially the ones that are operating in today's market, should be responsible and would be responsible. There is a challenge with the recycling of the carpet. That is something that is getting better. There's a multitude of options that, you know, go from recycling to plastic lumber to reusing the material in other landscape applications to what is being trialed down in Houston, Texas as chemical recycling. But to answer the question a little bit more directly, the cost is not that high when done properly. A lot of the transport cost is really what the variable is, less the recycling cost.
Diana, I want to go to you, and then I want to go to Trey Virgo. Trey, you could come on and speak to what you're putting into the chat about the recycling.
And I appreciate that there are definitely different actors with different behavior profiles in the industry. I'm not purporting to classify all of them under any of those categories, but there are definitely some who are not behaving the way their mothers might like. First of all, there is no regulation anywhere in the US, anywhere. It's in one of those videos I put in, regulating what is to be done with artificial turf. So it's really what your municipality will allow or what you can get away with. And as I mentioned before, they're bulky, they're heavy, so transporting them is not cheap. And nobody wants that stuff dumped. So either, yes, maybe you can find a dog run that'll take it or a golf driving range or something, but think about 80,000 square feet times probably 20,000 fields, probably more than that, and 1,200 coming out every year. So that's a lot of dog runs. I don't see it happening. So then the question is, okay, you can separate out some of the infill, maybe you can use some of it again on something else. God knows who wants twice used shredded tires, but far be it from me. But the plastic field, the stuff with the PFAS in it, the stuff that makes microplastics, the stuff that weighs hundreds and hundreds, thousands of pounds and cannot be reused and cannot be recycled yet, according to big industry players. So the answer is it goes wherever you can get rid of it. And maybe you're paying somebody to take it away. Maybe somebody is paying you to take it because they think they're going to use it at a paintball site or something. How many paintball sites? I mean, there just aren't enough. We're going to have to open a lot more paintball sites. So my answer is it's getting dumped. You know, best case scenario, it's going into a lined landfill where the PFAS cannot leach into the water that you hope to drink another day. Thank you.
Thank you. Trey, Brindle.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Garen said. In addition to all those ways that we can recycle it, we've been recycling fields, entire fields, into turf pad product, our NXT Play pad. We've recycled over 200 full sports fields so far, and that number is climbing.
Where?
Every field. Oh, I'm sorry, Dana. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I can't get anybody to tell me where this place is. Be great to have an address.
It's in Dalton, Georgia. So feel free to come Northwest Georgia, and we'll give you a tour of our plant where we accept turf rolls, we shred it into raw material, and we put it back into turf pad. So that number is 200 fields and climbing. We have our client, the Maret School, has one of our cradle to cradle turfs and our natural play infill. Our cradle to cradle standards, a rigorous, comprehensive product standard that assesses the ingredients and products down to 100 parts per million, including chlorinated and fluorinated chemicals. And we have the commitment to that, and an entire office of sustainability that really is meant to meet and exceed the environmental expectations of our clients.
So Trey, just let me press on this, because I've understood from Maret and presentations they've made to our advisory neighborhood commission, the task force that's specifically set up to monitor the construction of the fields, that the product from Shaw does have PFAS in it, and it's acknowledged to have PFAS. And can I confirm that with you? And then I have a follow-on question.
Well, we've actually taken that processing aid out of our chemistry, and we're using a different type that is not fluorinated chemical. We do not intentionally use PFAS. It's been tested before without, since PFAS is so, prevalent in our environment, we have to handle it with gloves and put it into special packaging materials to be sent off so that it doesn't get environmentally contaminated. So.
Right.
But really, to speak well on PFAS, we have Troy Virgo here who can really speak to that. I'm the biomechanist, not nearly a chemist. So if you would like Troy Virgo to speak, that would be what I would suggest.
I want to go to Troy. If we can get, though, a couple other questions in from the members of the community, because I know that they're wanting to ask them. Tracy Stewart, and then Mary Callahan. Tracy, go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much, Bruce. Tracy Stewart. I'm actually a Massachusetts resident, and something Mr. Brindle just said struck me. Newton, Massachusetts just installed Shaw turf at Newton South, and their field, in fact, went to Pottstown, Pennsylvania. Why didn't it go to the Dalton, Georgia Shaw sports facility? Why is it sitting in a warehouse in Pennsylvania waiting to be recycled?
Yeah. Hi, Tracy. That's so we recycle fields as we can take them in to make the product. It goes into a product, so we can recycle it as that product becomes more able to sell. So,
you're not taking full capacity of what you're producing.
The owner is in charge of the disposition.
Okay.
So we take as many as we can.
All right. One other quick question. I've done research on Shaw Industries, which is also Shaw Flooring, and it seems that there are at a minimum 54 different plants of different types in Dalton, Georgia. Could you give the exact address and plant number of the recycling facility?
The recycling facility, Troy, feel free to contact us and I'll give you that address. I don't know it off the top of my head. It's in Dalton, Georgia. T7.
If you give it to me afterwards, I'll distribute it to everybody.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks.
One thing I just want to mention, though, and that is getting back, and we talked about this during the panel on March 26th. We went into great depth and detail with 3 independent scientists on PFAS. So we're not going to go back and revisit all of the data that was provided there. But all artificial turf to date tested has PFAS, we understand. And that was a conclusion that came out of the meeting prior, and independent studies had confirmed that before our meeting. It's not something our meeting brought about in terms of discovery. So when it's recycled, understanding that it's not disposed of then, but it's turned into other products, repurposed, there is still a PFAS residual that goes along with that. So we're not eliminating the PFAS when we recycle it. The PFAS is still present. which is an environmental concern that then transcends the specific application of turf as the turf is repurposed and converted into the products. Just to put that out there. Mary Callahan, go ahead.
Quick question. Both the Lafayette Field and the proposed Maret Field have other properties completely contiguous to them. My question is about the destruction of microbiome. How long does that last? Can it be restored? How long does it take to restore the microbiome? And how far does the destruction of the microbiome of the soil extend to contiguous properties?
That may be a question for Troy Virgo, since he's Director of Sustainability for Shaw, Mary. Troy, if you want to come on and answer that question, feel free, or we can go to Darren or Trey Brindle. But Troy, if you're available, by all means, unmute yourself and come on and activate your video, and I'll call on you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that question, please?
It's restoration of the biome, Trey. That's what she was asking. Mary Callahan was asking about. Mary, go ahead.
Yes. How far will the destruction of the microbiome extend into contiguous properties? And how long does it take to restore it?
No, I'm not altogether sure that the question. Certainly, I'm struggling to make sense of the question to myself. When an artificial turf field is put in, there is various construction done on the site for the carpet and the infill to sit on, including sub base and drainage prep. So the area that the field sits on, whatever soil was there is typically removed as part of that installation process. John Amato could probably talk more specifically about that. In terms of extending beyond the field, there is no. I mean, wherever your field is, whether it's natural grass or artificial turf, whatever seating, stadium, parking lot, roads you have around. I mean, there is no difference. There is no magical extension out of artificial turf to attack the soil.
So it's just under the area where the artificial turf is placed that the microbiome is destroyed.
To the extent of what you're talking about, the microbiome is the soil that pre-existed prior to the installation, then yes.
Healthy soil, yes.
Yes.
All right, let me just take stock of the time. We're 7 minutes after the hour, so I want to keep us more or less on schedule. Let's take one more question from the community, if there is one more comment from the panel. John Amato, you have your hand up, so go ahead. You're muted, John. You have to take yourself off mute.
I just wanted to assist in the answer to that question. The topsoil is where we have nutrients and vegetation and life that disappears when we put a synthetic turf field. It's usually at the edge of the turf field, the edge of the pavement, and that topsoil that was removed goes somewhere. I'm not sure. It could go to a yard that doesn't have a field. It could go into a new field. Who knows where it goes, but it gets relocated. They're not destroying it. It gets purchased and sent away to another project. But at that site, it's gone. Wherever that footprint is being impacted.
Okay, John, thank you for that. Is there any further question from the community? I'm happy to take one more before we wrap up. If not, then let me, first of all, thank all the panelists for taking time out of your busy lives to be part of this conversation. I very much appreciate it. You are contributing to the education of my constituents. It's great information provided here tonight to help them form their own views and judgments about artificial turf versus natural grass. Some of you have done this now twice. So I appreciate Darren, Melanie, for you guys, and others have been on this call. We're on the call previously as participants, so I really appreciate all of you taking the time. This concludes this two-part series. Again, looking at both the chemicals in turf and the safety issues around turf, and then, of course, the issues regarding playability, the design, maintenance, construction, the cost of natural grass versus artificial turf fields. We didn't answer all the questions. I've been in touch with probably another panel as a whole of potential participants who couldn't be with us tonight. I know there's a lot of information out there that our community would be interested in. I'm going to do my level best to continue to provide it so that everyone has access to the facts and information they need. And with that, I just want to thank everybody for participating, all of you who've come in from the community and those of you who have come in from parts all over the country. Very much appreciate your time and your attention. So thank you very much. Be in touch. Those that made presentations, please share them with me. As before, I'll share those out. And we'll do any follow-up that the community wishes. Be in touch with me directly. I'm interested in your feedback. So thank you very much. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.